back, Emma. It's good to be on a Chewing the Fat with you again.
Me too. It's exciting.
You're looking great. You look like you've got some weight lifted off your shoulders. Has something happened?
Yes.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, no, I am no longer an elite gymnast.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
What does that mean?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Well, it basically means I'm not spending 3 to 4 hours doing gymnastics every single day in the gym.
Mm.
And it means that I have retired again for the third time.
3 times retired.
Yeah, yeah. But it also, you often spoke about how I didn't retire. I just went to the Olympics in my retirement.
Yes.
And when I was like knees deep in gymnastics, I really struggled to grasp that. Like I saw it, but I didn't grasp it. And now that I'm back out of it again, I'm like, no, it's so true because I I was doing gymnastics for a purpose and it wasn't to just be a gymnast. So it doesn't really feel, yeah, as big of a deal as it would to if I had officially retired again, but it just feels like I've just slipped back into natural patterns.
Yeah. So just walk me through those very quickly, those 3 retirements.
All right, in 2018, I retired for 6 months because I had missed out on the Rio Olympics in 2016. I had said to mum and dad, please pay for me for 2 more years and I'll go to the 2018 Commonwealth Games. But a year before that, I snapped my Achilles. I made it back for the trial for the Com Games, but I didn't get medical clearance. So I was a bit like, stuff you, I'm out. That one was an emotional retirement. And I spent 6 months being a normal person, hated it, it was so boring. So then I went back to gymnastics. Mum and dad, please pay for me for 2 more years. Went to had all intentions of going to Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. And then that fell through. COVID was a big disruptor in that. So then I sat down, and this time it wasn't an emotional decision. Cons list, I spoke to all the appropriate people, and I made the decision to finish up and retire for good. And that lasted 3.5 years. Then I
Yes.
came back.
Yes. Got it. Well, here's what's really powerful is the first time, how old were you?
In 2018, I was 22,
Mm,
22.
okay. Okay. So that's like you quit,
Yep.
right? So, because even you saying a 6 month retirement, that's just like you quit on a
Yeah, I
tangent.
quit. I
Yeah.
quit.
Yeah. You can see that now. And then the second time round, um, or at least each one is somewhat associated with the Olympics,
Oh, I know.
Rio, Tokyo, and then after Tokyo, you really were retired.
Yeah.
How do you know you moved on? And then it wasn't about becoming a gymnast again or being a gymnast. It was getting complete for you what had remained incomplete, and that was being an Olympian.
Yes.
And you did that, right? So what's powerful is that, and that's why I kept saying to you, no, you're retired and going back to competitive gymnastics as your vehicle to fulfill that dream of being an Olympian is distinct, right, from what you thought it was. And that's why it's so easy for you now to see it, right? That you're
Yeah.
outside of it.
Yeah, so much. Yeah, well, and I really should have stepped back into, or I should have stepped out of doing gymnastics probably after Olympics, but it's taken me a good 9 months to get to that.
Yeah, it's a process of completion.
Mm.
Yeah. So why don't you talk, because this is valuable for people, right? Everyone's got something that they're tethered by from their past, whether it's something that they've like unfinished business is
Mm.
one way to say it. Another way to say it is like you haven't demonstrated for yourself or others or proven a point, or it just lacks integrity that you quit. And as I've said before, I quote Steve Waugh, in his biography, says something to the effect of, there are many talented people in this world, but what makes a champion is someone who doesn't quit when they fail, right? And they've got whatever it takes to come back and get the job done. And it's a big deal to complete things. It's very easy to quit and walk away. And, most things in life for human beings, including myself, if I look back on my own life, there aren't too many things that I've actually authentically failed at. Mostly stuff gets tough, or I get pissed off, or something happens and I quit, right? And that's a survival strategy. It's all in order to avoid dealing with the impact of actually failing, right? The impact is just because we have collapsed failure with who I am as a human being. So when one fails, what we say to ourselves is, I am a failure.
Mm.
That's tough to deal with versus, no, I just failed at that game, right? It's not who I am as a human being. So anyway, all of that is a process of growing up and maturity, and you're taking it like head on. Like,
Oh, well, it's funny you say that because and something that obviously we discussed and you helped me a lot with was I was very heavily, I am a gymnast. And so I definitely associated myself with not making the Olympic Games. I'm not necessarily sure that I saw it as a failure when I decided to quit and or retire, but that was something that I like heavily I was a gymnast. And so this time around, it was interesting because I found myself like being drawn into that again. And that was probably the hardest thing for me to let go of.
mm,
So,
yeah, well, the end was nigh. You're getting old, Emma.
I know, I'm getting old. Um, but yeah, so I think that that's a really cool way to put it because when I was trying to decide and we sat down and had a chat in Sydney and I'd had a chat, to mum and dad and a few other people, and a big reason why I wanted to continue doing it was one at redemption because I was pissed off at how I did it at the Olympics. But again, that because it was very much based in identifying pretty much as being a gymnast and it was very I felt like it's what made me special,
Right.
and without it, it wasn't going to make me special anymore.
Yeah.
And I also think that when I retired in 2020, a lot happened. And there was also a part of me, and we can unpack that well, because I think that would be really interesting for people. But there was a big part of me that's been like, oh my God, I'm really nervous. Like, I don't want that to happen again.
Like gymnastics was your saving grace because it got you into shape, and yeah.
Yeah. And it was, yeah, it was very easy to be welcomed back into that community that I've known so well and really thrive, and it's very comfortable. Um, but I'm a totally different person.
Yeah. You are. You are. And you'll continue to be because it's ever evolving, right? So you're continually evolving, continually transforming, always in the game of mastering and transforming, never ever quite arrived somewhere. That's where we shoot ourselves in the foot, is we think that we've arrived somewhere, or this is who I am. I know me. This is my lot in life. And we become very righteous and positional about that. Yet, you've just proven it's everyone's so malleable, right?
Mm.
fixed in any way, shape, or form. And you went from, being a gymnast and that's all you were, but you had to reinvent yourself. You had to become an Olympian, right? It's distinct.
Yeah.
It's distinct. So you have, in effect, demonstrated that you can be any way, right? As Shakespeare said, the world is your stage and you play a character, right? So that character is something of your own creation. And that's
Mm.
all there is. And forevermore, we're being attempting, hopefully, right? Being responsible for whatever character we end up playing in any moment in time in our life and in any given situation. So that's what's really powerful, because then if you get that whoever you've been up until this point is the character or a character that you've been playing, then a bit of space opens up in which you can play any other character.
Mm. I definitely learned that through this experience of going back to gymnastics and making it to the Olympic Games. I mean, I didn't actually we would talk about it all the time. I didn't even know if I would actually make it. And I think that's what made it more fun. It was the goal, and it gave me like the purpose, like why I was getting up every day to go to the gym and why I had restructured my week. But because I was like not sure, I wasn't really set on it because I wasn't sure if it was going to happen. So every day when I was doing the work, it was fun. Like I enjoyed it. I was doing it because I got to do it, not because I had to
Hmm.
as well. Like that was quite a distinction for me. Oh, but yeah, then I got sucked straight back into being a gymnast, and it's taken me a little bit to step outside of that. Um, there was something that you said just then that was really, I'll come back to it. It resonated. I'll come back to it. It'll come back to me.
Yeah. Okay, good. Because there's so much that we can unpack and
I
so many
know.
perspectives, and it's very useful for people, and we'll bring this all the way back to, what we're committed to for people, and this is the process of transformation. Okay. So why it was like that, you said fun and you were free and you were going for, there's a distinction called committed yet unattached.
Mm,
So you're in the game, you're on the court or in the gym or whatever your playground is. And I like saying it like your playground, whether it's tennis court or a stage or in the gym or whatever, that's your playground. And you really did have the experience of playing. But when you play a game, you play committedly. You want to play to win. You don't just play the game for the sake of playing the game. You play to win. And that's what has you expand in your capacity as a human being, right? And your experience of yourself. But if you're committed and unattached, there's a whole world of freedom in which you can just
mm.
fully express yourself and go for it, right?
Yeah.
And then you're just living inside of the possibility of what am I kidding myself? I'm 28 years of age. I've been retired for more than 3 years, 3.5 years, whatever it is. And who am I to be doing this? But man, imagine if I did. How freaking cool would that be? And it was like that game.
Yeah.
What if? Imagine if. How about like just that world of possibility? That's the future that you are living into, that you're also given by. And the thing I really acknowledge you for is it wasn't just your willingness to play that game and stand for what was possible and live into that realm, is you created a realm for others to live into as well. It brought an aliveness, not just to yourself, but to those that were privileged to be able to interact with you and be in your space during that time, right? It's such an extraordinary gift that we as human beings give to others when we play full out, committed yet unattached. Anything you want to say or share about that?
I think that's what made it all the more worth it to me. When I was up, when I made the Olympics, for example, I think I went to go and see. I've got that mentor through a place called Minerva. She's my business mentor. So she's only known me for a very, very, very short period of time. And I've been talking to her, learning about business, and because I'm on a board, it's not really that related to gymnastics. But when I made the team, I caught up and had coffee with her, and I walked in and I was like, "We made it!" And I remember her saying to me, "I I love the fact that you walked in and you said we." And I didn't even think about it because it wasn't me personally that just did all of the work myself. I could not have made it if it wasn't for, okay, you, Mark, Alan, Dave, Mum, Dad, Maddie, Julian. Like there was like a whole group of us that it made the whole experience so much more meaningful. And you know what? When we got the announcement, or we got told individually who made the team, we were on a Teams call, and they sent me the recording of my Teams call when they told me that I got on the team, because apparently I had the best reaction. But it's very special. And I remember when I did the Simpler Health Protocol and you were talking to me about the power of contributing to others and sharing. Let's talk about that, for example. And I didn't want to do that. For 2 years, I didn't want to tell anyone about what I had done with Simpler Health. I didn't want anyone to see anything except for all of the shiny things about me. And I didn't realize how limiting that was to me,
Mm.
and how much more of an impact it has when you achieve something great. And yes, it's like for me, but it's for others and with others. And that was, and still is, the most epic part of the story.
Yes. Yes. It really is. It's what has you be real and relatable. There's a lot about you online, lots of YouTube videos, your performances, and there's the in Baku, that performance, which is, where you won gold, and that was amazing. However, my two favorites are when you were, I think, 11 and you fell, and it clearly would have hurt and made any grown person cry. And you just picked yourself up, got back on the beam, and finished the job, right? And then fast track to Paris, something similar happened. Right? You fell off the beam. There you are. The world really was your stage. You had everyone in that stadium watching you,
Mm.
and you're known as the beam queen. And it was the last apparatus, and you were the last competitor in the Australian team to go on the beam with high expectations, and you fell off. They're my two favorites because they're real.
Mm.
That stuff happens, you know, and you can either dwell on that. In reality, it's diluted by so many more extraordinary performances. Like it's irrelevant against the backdrop of the multitude of extraordinary performances throughout your entire career.
Mm.
But those two make you real and relatable, right? And powerful, and that you got back up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, there's one thing now when I go around and I do talks, in particular to gymnasts, I just tell them that we learn such a superpower that other people don't learn. We learn how to get back up. And that's not, especially nowadays, that's really not something that you're taught. It's something you're told to do, but you don't get much of an opportunity to do that, to really just splatter yourself, especially in front of people, and have nothing really around you, and you just got to get back up. And then the second thing to that is, I like what you said about it being relatable, and it was realistic too. I think that I especially got caught up in the the possibility of when I made the Olympic team, all of a sudden my whole broader purpose, everything went totally out the window, and it was like gymnastics, gymnastics, Olympics, Olympics. And my thoughts are like, oh, how good would it be to, win a gold medal? Like that would be such an icing on the cake. And when I fell off, I mean, I know that, well, we've had this discussion. There were some things in the background that came to play. Whatever. The matter of fact outcome was that I fell off. When I got off the beam and walked down, and my mum and dad were in the stands, Julian was in the stands, you guys all watched me. Everyone was there with me in that moment. And it was realistic. It was real. I'd been back at training for 9 months. Like just even the mere fact that I had made the Olympic Games was absolutely epic. I think that if I had gone there and like won a gold medal, we would have disrupted global gymnastics for the rest of
Yeah, I think
like
so.
I didn't work as hard as Simone Biles for the 3 years that I was on my ass doing nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. See, that's putting it into perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. That's not to say that I didn't. Well, actually, I got drug tested immediately after competition. I was in drug testing till 2 o'clock in the morning. And then when I finally got out, mum, dad, and Julian had been waiting for me, and I just ran up to them and I started crying my eyes out. So, and we all had a bit of each individually when I called everyone. I think everyone, even Mark, had tears in his eyes when he was talking to me. So all of us were gutted about it, but how cool that I was even there.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. And then, as I was saying, committed but unattached. And then when there's a breakthrough, right, an unexpected breakthrough, an unexpected result, and that really was, I think there was a turning point. You competed in the nationals, you discovered some new distinctions around performance, and then 2 weeks after that, competed in the Oceania Games, played,
Mm,
didn't even know you were winning. You were just enjoying it, right? You won the whole thing. That was, I think, the turning point. Then there's, okay, making the Olympic team to go to Paris. And then you had to be, rightly so, just focused on that,
mm.
right? But then there's a time when you go from committed unattached to committed and attached,
Yeah, okay.
right? So for everyone, there's something that you kind of you see it sometimes in relationships. It's like, you know what, I'm done. I'm just free and single and I'm just enjoying myself. And that's when people meet the love of their life.
Yeah.
Or they've bottomed out and it's like, I couldn't lose any more. I'm a complete disgrace in my own view of myself and perhaps my family. And that's when, there's the opportunity. You got nothing further to lose. You're at rock bottom. How much further down can you go? And people create great things.
Mm,
This is like, oh, screw it. You just committed unattached. But there's a time when you can then become attached. Like you get enamored with what you're up to. We get an ego, a big head. All of that sort of stuff. I mean, everyone listening to this can relate, right? And then there comes a time when you think you're invincible and you get a little bit too cocky sometimes, or everyone's had the experience of like self-sabotage, like you shoot yourself in the foot, and it's like there's some little voice in your head going, what do you think you're doing? You're not this great, right? And you'll create dramas in your life, or you'll screw up, or just hide out, or run away, or, something to sabotage, right? But this is all just part of the cycle of being human and playing the game of life, right? And games within that game of life. So you got to create games and you got to play the games and you got to play to win. You're doing that. And that comes with highs and lows and, figuring stuff out. And otherwise, if you don't have those pressures, you never evolve, you never transform, you never figure stuff out.
mm.
You need the
Yeah.
press and pressure of a game.
Yeah. I always try to remember, I think I read a book about it one time and they said that when you're most successful, that's when you should be the most humble. And I always keep that in the back of my mind because I've definitely experienced a lot of times, like you're just saying, where I've been on top or things going really, really well, and you stop doing the basics. I think
Mm.
that's where it goes awry. You're like, oh, I don't need to do the little things anymore. And it's like, no, the little things are how you got to where you are. You have to do the little things. And so I keep that for everything that I'm kind of doing now. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting when you talk about committed and attached, and then committed and unattached. How do you stay how do you stay unattached? It's almost like a full-time job to make sure that you're not too attached to the commitment. Because I've experienced that. I can totally understand that. It was like before the Olympics, in the lead up to the Olympics, I was so unattached to going to the Olympics that I was just committed to, making it work, having fun, like you said, being out there and enjoying it. And then when I went back into that team environment, and it wasn't even necessarily just me. It was like a team of us, like a pack that had this attachment to an outcome. And it was so, like, I didn't think, like, for lack of better word, toxic. It was not, our commitment was so, I don't know, it wasn't very good. And even now, some of the things that I'm experiencing after gymnastics, I'm like, how do I stay unattached to this?
Yeah. Well, I think you got to have times and moments of being attached.
Oh, that's so annoying.
I know. That's the paradox of it. It's otherwise, because you got to have something at stake.
Mm,
If there's nothing at stake, then that degree of freedom and just open self-expression that you had the privilege of experiencing for a period of time, it gets boring.
yeah.
Not just, then you become a bit of a whatever. Like, so that something's got to be put at stake. That's what makes the game interesting. The game of life, look, we delve in the realm of health. So it's not just that people's health is at stake, their life is at stake.
Mm,
And we dabble, quite frankly, in the realm of prevention. There's so much more to learn and be open to and contribute. But there are just phenomenal, extraordinary human beings, that surgeons and emergency doctors and all this nurses and teams, like experts that actually do save lives. Like, life really, there is something at stake right there. And you get attached. Think that's we can't diminish that. That's part of the human experience, and we got to see the value in it. And I think how do you be responsible for it and
mm.
progress and move forward is notice when you're attached.
Yeah, okay. And I like having value in it. That makes sense. Because I think maybe sometimes we get too attached. I know that I sometimes found that I'd get too attached to things that had no, like if someone said to me, why do you care about that? I'd be like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you had something at stake, and there was the team rallied together,
Mm,
that unit. And it's been some time since there was an Australian team that was able to committedly participate in the fulfillment of that possibility. Now, it's like when someone wins the lottery and you just gifted all of this money that you haven't necessarily spent your entire lifetime. It's not just, yes, you girls were deserved of that position and situation. Absolutely, you worked for it, but there's something to be said about being seasoned
mm,
in participating in that kind of possibility. There's being seasoned means you learn how to be responsible for your ways of being and acting when playing that game. And that just comes with experience. I think what you guys have done is just cracked it open now and reinvigorated gymnastics in Australia and inspired a whole new generation of young gymnasts that could go, wow, it really is possible for us here in Australia to compete at that level. And we too could be Olympians, you know. So you've cracked that open, and you know the hope is that over time, teams here in Australia and competitors will become more and more seasoned and experienced at competing at that level with that much pressure as a team.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a big purpose obviously behind going back as well. Like not just completing my own story, but to contribute it back to other people because I had noticed that gymnastics had been, you know, really negatively viewed all of a sudden and participation, everything was going down. And I realized that I was a pretty cool person. And a lot of that was thanks to what I had learned in gymnastics.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's so wonderful. It's so great because, all right, so
Yeah, moving on.
oh my gosh, distinguishing um, identity from who you are as a human being,
Mm,
right? Who you've identified yourself as in the past. And there's power in that as well, right? Because that's when you were 11 and you fell off the beam. I keep saying 11. Were you 11? Did I?
yeah,
Yeah.
roughly.
Yeah. So that's what had you get back up because that's what a gymnast does. They do gymnastics and keep going. Now, that fall, in many instances, and I've coached, trained, and developed thousands of people, and there's always a moment where something happens and people quit and quit on themselves and on that dream and whatever they were participating in because of things like that. And it didn't, it fueled you, right? So if that was the beginning of who you really are as a gymnast, and then to fall off at the Olympic Games at the pinnacle is the universe's way of reminding you that, hey, this isn't the be all and end all of who you are, right? It's just such a gift.
Mm.
That's why, I mean, it would have been devastating, of course, for you and everyone at the time, but I was like, yes. Especially when I saw Jules run down and you had your back to the camera, and then he had nothing but a massive smile and just beaming with love and support. And then you turned around and I was like, yeah, she's great. She's great. And then you interacted with your team and you just made sure that they were great. You know, that's a distinct human being. That's not just some girl with talent.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I know I keep saying I'm so glad I went to the Olympics as 28-year-old Emma, not 24 or 20-year-old Emma. Would have been a whole different experience.
Always perfect. So, you know, there are those moments in time when stuff happens, and whether it's you fall off a beam or a bike or someone picks on you or um, you know, you fail at a test and you experience a parent's disappointment or whatever it might be, and people ruin their entire lives over it.
Mm,
You built a career on it, right? So that shows that it's possible. And then in light of, okay, there's value in identifying with some possibility. There's value in that. And there's value in distinguishing that you did that. It's not who you really are. You decided that you're a gymnast, right? You did that. So who was the you that did that? Well, maybe that's the real Emma. Who's that? So, right, that's what there is to discover now. And you got to invent games. You got to play them hard. You got to play to win.
mm,
And you got to learn how to deal with not just failure, but you got to learn how to complete things. So that whatever unfinished business with regards to the Olympics, right? Sometimes it takes, all right, screw it. I'm going back. And you give yourself fully to it and you did it and you became an Olympian. And then with regards to being a gymnast, right? You've always got that. Okay. So it is who you are, but being a competitive gymnast, how do you bring that to completion? So the Olympic Games, that whole journey, you brought that to completion. You got it complete by going back and doing it. And then ultimately, with regards to your gymnastics career, bringing it to completion is acknowledging when it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
And I was, as you know, I'm like, holy crap, she's gonna compete. And I'm all up for it. I'm enrollable. I can be inspired. I'm like, oh yeah, she wants to go back to the World Championships in Jakarta later this year. And, she's just going to focus on the beam and, prove a point, get that bit complete for herself. And ultimately, what you've demonstrated is completion really is a declaration. You just declare yourself complete and then you honor that if you're good for your word. Okay.
Mm.
And you are, right? You really are. And um, I was listening to you. I said, just speak as we'll try to work out together like what would be most appropriate. And just listening to you speak, it was pretty clear that you were done. As much as I was like up for the Jakarta games and all of that, I was like, she's done.
I know we're sitting there in, where is it? Balmain.
Where were
No,
we? Oh, Birkenhead Point Shopping
Birkenhead. Yeah,
Centre,
yeah.
the
We're sitting there at
cafe
Birkenhead
by the
Point,
water.
and I'm like convincing you why I can't do it anymore. And you're
Yeah,
like, why are you doing it?
yeah, you're done.
Yeah. I think that's really important is that declaring it probably wouldn't hold the same power if I hadn't learned to uphold that. I don't think that would be as powerful to myself if I hadn't learned now to almost like trust that I'm good for my word now.
Yes.
People probably actually went, and I've said that in the past quite lightly, right? Like I've said in 2018 I retire. That was a very light retirement, obviously. Whereas so people are looking to see if I'm legit this time, but I know that I can trust my word now because I've made that work so many times in other areas of my life that it took me, like I didn't put that out there lightly. I put that out there when I was absolutely ready. Yeah, and I'm like, yep, done. Feels right. Moving on. No looking back.
Yeah. Well, that's what to be responsible for bringing something to completion,
Mm,
right? If like it's absolutely spot on. Just declaring something complete, and then in the aftermath of that, thinking to yourself, "Oh, but am I really?" Right? No, you did the work to bring it to completion, and this happens. It's very, very powerful because you can do this everywhere in life, especially in relationships, in particular, losing someone as well. I was asked the question when my mother had her hemorrhagic stroke, are you complete with your mother? And I said yes. And I really was. There was nothing left incomplete between mum and I.
mm,
Right. And you lost someone very important in your life recently, someone who contributed enormously to the gift of the journey that you've been on in recent times that you'll continue to have for the rest of your life. Your coach, and he was just a beautiful, beautiful man. And thank you for introducing me to him. And he and I had our own moments as well. And he was a real, you know, people consider me a coach's coach. And he's someone that I look up to as a coach's coach. He was a real coach, like, the truest distinction of that phenomenon, that extraordinary human being that a coach is. That was Mark. And when Mark passed, you really were complete. And it wasn't just that had you done the work, you'd participated fully in each other's lives inside of a great endeavor, fulfilling something unbelievably extraordinary. That's what had your relationship be complete. And then when it was time for him to go, you really were complete.
mm,
Yeah. I mean, that's uh like gymnastics is pinnacle of movement, and the way that you lived your relationship with your coach Mark really was, in my view, the pinnacle of relationships. There was a real honoring and respect and full participation in service of some great endeavor that will continue to contribute and make a difference to many, many more lives. And, you know, the real intention I know for you was to inspire that next generation of Australian gymnasts, you know. So that was amazing. And this process of being complete and completion is also a great test. I mean, you know, you really were done. Like, and this is where you get to choose. So it's not just the declaration, I'm complete. You choose ending it. You choose moving on. You choose what's next. You choose that that's now the past. And it's like in anything, you go through a process and then you choose and you declare. It's like when you and Jules get engaged, okay?
This year, hopefully. Yeah.
In Jules. So that engagement period, oftentimes for people, it's not all just wonderful bliss. It's you get engaged and then you test the heck out of each other,
Mm.
right? And you test the heck out of each other up until that point where you have to set a wedding date. Otherwise, the engagement is kind of, there's no point to it. The
Yeah.
point is there's a time scheduled in the future where you publicly declare there's no longer a me and a you, there's just us. Right. And then it's recognized by the state and you sign some paperwork and stuff like that. Right. So, oh my God. So, what all of your self indulgent identity and all of that sort of stuff, it's like there's an endpoint to that. It's like, okay, and then it's not like you uh, die as an individual, but that individual gets more powerfully included in the possibility of that relationship.
Mm.
Okay. So that's what's confronting. And sometimes, you know, people create dramas and pick fights and everything like that. And then the wedding date gets pushed back. But you go through all of that in service of when it comes time to publicly declare, given everything that you've gone through, are you authentically choosing? Do you hear that?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And that's what makes then the future powerful. You start anew. It's like now everything up until that point is the foundation upon which you can build the next thing.
Mm. Yeah, I think I can see why I guess like declaring completion for some people, and it was for me in the past, very not scary, but I wouldn't stick to it as much as I do now, let's put it that way. But that's because I don't think that I'm not sure if it's the right term, but I don't think I fully trusted myself and my choices. Whereas now I'm like, yeah, right thing. Yep, right thing. Like if it and if for some reason I fall flat on my face, then I'll make it work anyway. Because I've done the work to figure out, well, like you said, like whoever I am decided to go back to gymnastics, and this time it wasn't because it's a habit. It wasn't because I identify as a gymnast. It was because I can and I will. And same thing, with meeting Julian, it was very much, okay, this is me as a person. This is kind of like what I am looking for in another. I think that's a very important decision, as you said. Like you can either get stronger or a little bit weaker, depending on who you decide to commit to for the rest of your life. And there was no question. I was like, yep, yep,
Yeah.
I choose you. Yep, great.
Yeah. Well, you're good for your word.
Mm.
And who you are is your word. So there's only power in declaring something complete if you're good for your word and you can trust yourself, right? So that's the groundless ground upon which one stands. You know, some other people may have heard it as I am,
Oh,
right? So you are your word.
yeah.
But
Wait, can I cut in here? Because I
yeah,
remember when we, when I think it was the second time that I had gone and met with you about Simpler Health and I had started doing the protocol. I was maybe 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in. So I'd already lost a little bit of weight, but I still thought I was a roly poly at this stage. I wasn't very happy with my life. And
Roly poly.
I
So
remember you writing on the whiteboard in your old apartment, "You are your word." And I was like, this guy's on crack. I don't know what he's talking about at all. And now, I've been developing a talk, for example, to give to corporate to talk about gymnastics, whatever. And I find myself in there referencing you and speaking about like how you are your word, because that is what your relationship to self is. That is what self-trust is. So it's so interesting.
yeah, it's a journey. I mean, this is we're constantly unpacking this in our own evolution, and especially, when we expand the size and capacity of our game, or even shift, and we're in a new kind of playing field. Who the heck am I?
Mm.
Right? So there's the confront of that. Anything that's unfamiliar, there's the confront, and we revert back to familiar ways of being and acting. Okay, so every time the game expands and your accountability expands, the integrity with which you hold yourself must expand accordingly.
Oh,
You can't play a bigger game with the same level of integrity with which you've held yourself in the past. That's right. What got you to where you're at now. It's to be. I loved when I was doing martial arts with Kancho Glenn Coxon, right? And for people who don't know Glenn, I mean, he's just an absolute phenomenon. He's the grandmaster of Bushido Kai karate. He developed and trained people in Benny the Jet's um, dojo, and designed the whole curriculum for Benny's dojo. He was training partner to Chuck Norris. He trained Bruce Lee's daughter. He holds multiple Guinness World Records for the most number of wooden boards broken in a minute, and the most number broken in no, the fastest time to break 1,000 boards, and all this sort of stuff, right? It's just an
my
amazing,
God.
amazing guy. So I was training with him, like personal one-on-one, and then when he would grade me, he would take my old belt and tie it up in a knot and hand it back to me. And he'd said, um, this came with hard work and and dedication and sweat, and it is to be honored. And as he tightened the knot, he said, "But never worn again."
Oh, that's great.
Right? It's like I just saw it as as a tourniquet. You cut something off, right? That's what I saw when he was tying the knot. But it's unbelievably powerful, because whoever you were up until that point, that's complete. And who I was someone becoming
Mm.
that next belt. And now I'm seen and related to as what, that belt represents, that new color.
That's so cool. I love that. It's such a good visual of it, because I guess you get stuck sometimes in, should I, when you're trying to create something in the future, how much do you reference the past?
Yes.
So that's a really cool way to put it, like a badge almost, because I can say forever now, I'm an Olympian. That's something that I get to say forever. But I also think that when I first finished gymnastics, where I kind of went sideways, was that I tried to create a new Emma, thinking that I could never be a gymnast again, like thinking that I'm no longer an athlete, I'm no longer a gymnast. A year and a half down the track, I didn't even look like one. But that, like, I didn't find that almost like a balance between understanding how my experiences and what I had done was able to support what I wanted to do in the future. So I really like that idea of just tying the belt, and you get this now, remember that forever, but like, okay, see ya next.
I
Don't
still
wear it.
have those belts. Those knots have never been undone.
Wow. Yeah, I love that.
Right? Now, this could be like, I don't know, people can get creative with this. Those clothes that people that are too big for them now, they go through simpler health, and they lose all this weight. And you got to ceremoniously, almost, just even if just for yourself, you got to declare never again in the kingdom. And am I ever surpassing that weight again? I'll forever remain under this weight. And every milestone, 90 kilograms, 80 kilograms. We've had people lose in excess of 90 kilograms, 50, 60, 40, like just massive amounts of weight. And you must continually evolve the human being that's there handling not only that situation, but living this life.
Mm.
And otherwise, you get seduced back again. It's kind of like, you wake up to, and whatever might cause this, it might be a doctor looking you in the whites of the eye saying, listen, you need to handle this, right? Or who was it? Someone, Trevor was interviewing someone he was coaching, and they started to realize how much they weren't fully participating in life. And there were things and events and stuff that they didn't get invited to, or they chose not to go to because they couldn't fully participate. They couldn't keep up, or, and it's a real withdrawal from life. And health is a function of participation, right? So you got to participate, and you can't participate until you handle your health, and you got to participate to
To
get that
handle.
health, right? So that it's self-referential. And if something will wake you up and you go, oh, and you realize that where you're at right now just stinks and it's not what you want. And then someone, if you're lucky enough, shines a light on what's possible. And you're like, wow, I just want to move towards that.
Mm.
And you take the steps. And sometimes, and I'm always reminded of Shawshank Redemption, when he trudges through a big, long tunnel full of crap. And sometimes that's what it takes. And can you imagine see what the advantage of being in the sewage pipe is you're constantly present to the poo, so long as you keep moving forward, right? If you just stop and you're not messing up and creating the fumes of the wastewater, etc., it is possible to get comfortable
Mm.
where you're at, right? And then it's easy to be seduced back to, oh, say if you wake up to the garbage dump that you're in, you move forward and you're away from it, and it's like, oh, it's amazing, you've lost weight, about 15%, or 15 kilograms, let's say, total body weight loss. That's when everyone starts noticing. 20 kilograms down for most people who have been that big is when they get, oh, for themselves, I can do this. And it really is possible, going all the way to that ideal body weight that my coach, said was just a done deal. But
Mm.
then the person wakes up to it for themselves. Something will happen and life becomes big. And it's like, oh, this is possible and that's possible and this is possible. But the confront of it all is very, very scary in the early stages because you haven't yet expanded the integrity with which you hold yourself. Okay. And that's where you get a bit messed up and lost. And sometimes it's easier to look back at that garbage dump, and with the light shining on it now, it looks pretty. And the fumes from the, waste, it's all colorful, and it's easy to get seduced back and go, oh, it wasn't that bad, or I really enjoyed it then, but you hated yourself and you can't remember that, or whatever it was that didn't work, or the possibility had been fulfilled and you were just hanging out now. You see that with many athletes. They're done and then they don't know how to reinvent themselves. And I've shared with you about the conversation I had with Pat Rafter, the tennis player, and it took him a couple of years, and it took people, the right kind of people around him, like John Eales, et cetera, to provide the support for him to create that, what's my next championship game?
Mm. Yeah, I think, and that's very similar now. There's at the moment, for example, I don't have the first clue what I what I'm going to be doing in 5 years. Let alone 1 year. Okay, no idea. For the first sort of, I mean, I experienced this in 2020, where I didn't, world of possibilities, how exciting! I don't have gymnastics anymore. I'm so free, and I had this feeling of, I can do whatever I want, but who the f am I? So then, how am I supposed to do anything? And so I just had no responsibility, none at all, no responsibility, just cruised about life. Then, that led me to you and Simpler Health. And then from there, then all of a sudden I had something to focus on because you were like, oh, come on, I'll take you under my wing, be a coach. And then I had focus, then I had something like sort of like a ground to stand on all of a sudden. Whereas before I was floating in thin air. So then now I was like standing, but then I was trying to figure out, well, but how do I be even cooler? Like what can I actually do? And that's where I then learned about what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what is it that in life that I enjoy, what do I get pulled towards. I really enjoyed coaching people. I found that a lot of my experiences in gymnastics were highly relatable to these people and their stories of losing the weight and their purpose behind it and their fears. And when they'd have a week where it would go really well, we'd get to celebrate that together, and it was almost like winning a competition. And then they'd have a week where it didn't go well, or maybe they cheated or something like that, and it was like falling off and how do you get back on. And that's when I found a real love for using my experiences to help other people. So then when I went back to gymnastics, that was the motivator. It was like, cool, let's build from there. Let's like step up the steps. Now I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. But the one thing that I have now, no, okay, there's two things. There's two things. There's two things that I have now that I didn't have in 2020 when I retired. And number one is I now have my word. Like I did not have that before. I would say something and go back on it. I broke up with my ex and I got back together with him like 2, 3 times and he was not very good to me. Like I kept wanting to go back to gymnastics, but didn't know how to. Um, so I didn't have a high sense of self-trust, let's put it that way. And then number two, I didn't have support. I did, like I had my parents and stuff, but they too were very deep rooted in my identity of being a gymnast. So I didn't have a lot of people that they saw my potential, but they didn't know how to fully help me get there because they'd only ever known me that way. And now it's like I've got support and I've got my own support. So even though I have no clue yet, like visual, I know that I'll be good. I'll be sweet.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's I also think when I lost weight the first time around on phase one, right? And then I I didn't trust myself to keep it off because I had no idea how to do that. It was almost like I was looking for proof.
Mm.
But like I was the only one that could prove that to myself. And I
Mm.
avoided that like the Black Plague. And I find myself now that I've finished gymnastics again, I don't know what I look like really without doing 16 hours of gymnastics a day.
Mm.
And I find myself now being like, oh my God, shit, I'm scared. Because all I can really relate that back to was when I gained 15 kilos. So what I've done now, and I spoke to you about this a little while ago. I don't know yet how it's going to evolve, but immediately I was like, okay, the one thing I do know that I can do is I can stick to what I say I'm going to do. And I've understood now, I understand metabolic health, I understand nutrition. I've learned, thank God, I have a bit more knowledge. There's still a hell of a lot. You send articles every week, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know this. But I'm learning. And what I didn't have last time was that knowledge. So now I'm like, great, okay, I'm going to set a structure. I didn't have structure before. I'm like up at 5. Why? Because I'm up and it's something hard to do. And if I do something hard in the morning, I'm more likely to do it through the day. I'm exercising in the morning. Like I've got a bit more structure. And even though I'm still a little bit scared of, oh my God, I don't want to gain 15 kilos again, if I put those structures in place and I stick to it and I keep my word to myself, I know that I'll be okay.
Yeah.
Not that it doesn't scare the hell out of me, of course. Like,
Well, you can transform that fear as well. Okay. So you're not the same as you just rightly pointed to. You're not the same human being. And you can trust yourself to be responsible for whatever happens.
mm,
Listen, you get people gain weight, lose weight, whatever. It doesn't matter. What I love is that when we work with people, we leave them it's we leave them responsible with the capacity to deal with whatever happens, right? And athletes, you got to trust in all of the work that you've done well before, you met me, is you've been developing that part of your brain that determines resiliency, and it's bigger in athletes. And that's what had you get back up on the beam. So if ever you fall, you know you can,
mm.
right? And you're doing it now with the foundation of everything that you've accomplished to date, all of your successes and failures, anything that has worked, hasn't worked, all of the wisdom and experience. And, now that you've also contributed to hundreds of people, right, and their health and well-being, yeah, you're kind of screwed because you're on the hook now as well, right?
I think I said to a couple of people that I was coaching, I was like, well, I better not get fat now because I've got all of you guys to be responsible for. And they all started laughing. One of them said to me, oh, don't worry, Emma, I'll still listen to you. And if you were to get fat, and I was thinking to myself, you're lying.
So this is just, what you've really mastered, and you really have. And if just like um, when you go to a different belt in the martial arts, it takes either the sensei or a committee of senseis to declare one, uh, you know, a higher belt or a master or whatever. It's by way of declaration. And I'm saying to you, when it comes to managing your metabolic health, you're a master. So what that means it's not that you've arrived anywhere, as I said before. Now you can authentically engage in the game of mastery. So you're constantly mastering. I mean, there's, all the macronutrients, sure, to a degree with the micronutrients, and then there's other physiological changes that you're going to continue to learn. I mean, we're going to be implementing biological testing for age, um, and we'll be able to see, because there's some great assays that are available. Glycan age is one that I really like, where they measure the glycosylation structures on immunoglobulins. So that's a pretty decent indication, and it's quite variable depending on how well you manage yourself over time, but also acute changes like related to hormones and menopause and metabolic changes as well. And glycosylation is different to glycation. So you would have learned a little bit about glycation, where
Yeah.
the glucose gets stuck to the protein or lipid to create these advanced glycation end products. That's a non-enzymatic situation where you just take protein and glucose in a solution, the glucose will eventually stick, right? So that contributes to the aging process. But distinct to that, it contributes to it, but it's distinct to that are these carbohydrate side chains that are enzymatically attached to certain proteins, including immunoglobulins from our immune cells. And we can measure them. We can just take a blood sample and measure that, and we can tell people their biological age.
Oh my gosh, cool.
Yeah, so we'll be adding that into some of our programs before and after, and we'll be able to pair that not just with body composition tests and standard pathology results that they can get from their doctor, but also with gut microbiome testing as well. We can do nutrition testing and tailor make certain supplements for these individuals. We can even tailor the probiotics for their guts as well. in
Oh God.
more extreme cases where, our approach is good for like 90% of people that we encounter, but there are some that are just like, man, they're royally screwed. Their health is just like such a mess and it's complicated. So we've got to hit it with a bit more precision in our approach. But, there's all of that for you to learn. And then there's the neurology and, where I'm working with my scientific colleagues, supporting, a mutual friend of ours, Sophie Hood, the owner
Yeah.
of Soul Tonic, and some other manufacturers in Japan and in the US and here in Australia with these new iterations of products that can have a more profound impact. And it's not just about some fancy ingredients or a great brand or does it taste good? It's like, will it and does it have a meaningful impact on clinical outcomes over time and free people up to be able to function at their best? And it's only when one's health and well-being is optimized that and neuroinflammation is decreased and their metabolic system's working properly and they've got the energy to do the work called getting things complete, creating big games, choosing, or, being powerful in relationship, all of this sort of stuff. If you're unwell, if you're inflamed, you got brain fog, achy joints, you're so trapped in your internal state. It's very, very difficult to be out here in life participating in the way human beings are supposed to. And human beings, the being of a human being, is supposed to be out here in life, in the world. So, there's lots and lots and lots, but at least with the foundation or the platform and the environment of Simpler Health, you've got something there to build on and then go in whichever direction you want. And
Yeah.
as an Olympian and everything that you've accomplished today, you've just proven that you can do anything you want with the rest of your life. And that's just freaking exciting. Yeah.
It is so exciting. And I think that yeah, that's fun. But also it's like people need to, or I needed to remember as well though, that it is your responsibility. Like if I put my word to something, it's like my responsibility to make that happen. If I was to say to you, hey Dean, like I'm going to become a pilot, it's like, well, that's really good, but you need to go and do the pilot training, like get in. It's not just like I said, I declared like, oh, I'm going to be an Olympian, and didn't put in the work. It's the same thing with now. Okay, cool. So now I'm very committed to being a health coach, for example. It's like I then need to make sure, and it's my responsibility that I uphold that. If I was to let my health slip, then what good does that have, right? So, yeah, I mean that's a comfort.
Yeah. And then you got to practice a lot and coach a
Yeah.
lot of people and everyone out there who's listening to this, Trevor and now Chris and of course Emma are available to coach you and they want people to practice on, right? And
Yeah.
that's how you get to be great. That's how they get to be great. And we work it out in partnership with our coachees. It's coach to coachee. It's a very unique relationship and you work it out with them. And we have, a starting point, a platform that we can use, but then everyone's journey is distinctly theirs. It's uniquely theirs. And you go along that journey with the people that you coach, and every person that you coach, every journey is different. So you coach, tens of people, you're going to have in your own experience and knowledge and what you learn on those journeys as well, a life that's so big. But you coach hundreds of people, it just expands exponentially,
Mm.
right? And you can't do everything that you see as possible and available in the world, but you can empower others to fulfill on those visions and then experience their accomplishments as your own. So it's not all just Emma Nedo,
You.
right?
Yeah. Which is really cool. I really like that. That's um exciting because otherwise, yeah, you'd be trying to do everything under the sun.
Yeah.
But I also think that that takes letting go of that ego as well to sort of empower other people to do great things and remember that you're part in that too. Because not
Yes.
everyone, I remember we had a conversation once about acknowledging source, and I never understood that concept very well. And now I think that it's one of the most powerful things to do is to really acknowledge where and how you got to where you did. Like, also for me, partly gymnastics is a source too. And so, um, yeah, it's important to do because you don't create who you are on your own,
That's right.
which is good, thank God.
Yeah.
Imagine if
It's
you were
only,
left
oh my
to
gosh.
do life totally alone. That's what depression is. It's that loneliness. So I think that grasping that, from both acknowledging source, but also understanding that your role is like being a speck in amongst a whole sea of stars. Like that's really freaking cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Acknowledging and empowering source, and there's only so much an individual can carry on their own shoulders. So where you see it would make a difference, then empower and acknowledge source. And there's real honor in that, and there's real power and freedom as well. And you'll have moments in many years to come where you'll look back and continually acknowledge the opportunity that gymnastics was and the gift that it has been and will continue to be in your life, and key individuals like obviously your family, your parents and Mark in particular. And these people will always be a source of power, and their presence will be available to you at any time, as long as you have you're humble enough to recognize the value that they've been and continue to empower that. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, listen, this has been amazing. Good on you. Congratulations. And I think the last thing for me to say is the courage it takes to bring something to completion. It really does take a lot of courage, because the fear of the unknown, right? What's to come and who am I? But that's what makes the adventurous journey that you're about to embark upon. And not just about to, you are. I mean, you're well into it, and it'll continue to expand. But it does take courage, and courage is not the absence of fear. To be human is to have fear. Courage is to act in the face of that fear. So that's all you got to keep doing, is acknowledging the fear and do it anyway, as the book once said, whoever wrote that, whatever. Um, I'm sure someone wrote a book about that. And you just keep acting. You're always going to feel afraid, but that's part of being alive. So, man, there's been so much gold in this conversation. Just thank you for being the kind of person that I can have these conversations with, and it's all in service of contributing something to another that gives them power and freedom. And if they want to reach out to us, please do so. Come be part of the movement, see how we can make a difference to you in your life, and we're available for you. So thank you, Emma.
Well, thank you, Dean. And I also, you mentioned it earlier on, but I think that at the start of everything is your health and how, you can't do anything in life without your health. And so I feel very, very, very lucky that my health went sideways and it brought me to you and to Simpler Health, because everything that's happened from there has been a huge leap up the hill. So thank you.
Pleasure. My pleasure. All right.